One day, a sudden tear appeared in the sky, forming a blazing red cross-shaped rift. Its edges crackled with energy, radiating an ominous glow as if the heavens themselves had been split apart. On that fateful day, everything began to change. From the ominous rift in the sky, a gate tore open, flooding the world with chaos. Swarms of monstrous insect-like creatures poured out, their wings beating furiously as they descended upon the earth, and with their arrival, destruction followed. From beyond the rift emerged a world that would later be known as the Demon Realm. From its depths, ferocious and merciless monsters poured into the human world, their presence bringing chaos and ruin wherever they went. In humanity's darkest hour, certain individuals awakened with extraordinary abilities. These chosen ones, known as hunters, rose to stand against the monstrous threat, wielding powers that defied ordinary limits. These hunters were individuals who had awakened to the power of mana, granting them extraordinary abilities that set them apart from ordinary humans. With the emergence of these empowered individuals, humanity finally found the strength to fight back, launching a counterattack against the monstrous invaders. As the years went by, the scars of war slowly began to fade. Cities rose once more from the rubble, rebuilt under the warm glow of a new dawn. Though countless challenges still lingered, life gradually found its rhythm again. At the very least, some people were able to reclaim and enjoy a semblance of normalcy. However, peace was fragile. The threat was never truly gone, as monstrous creatures continued to emerge, forcing humanity to remain vigilant and ready for battle. To combat the relentless waves of monsters pouring into the world, warriors fought fiercely, determined to hold the line and protect humanity from annihilation. With a fierce cry, the warrior swung his weapon, striking at the monstrous abomination before him, its gaping maw lined with jagged fangs and filled with unblinking eyes. Every blow was a desperate attempt to keep the horrors at bay. Despite their bravery, there was a critical problem. The number of hunters who naturally awakened their powers was far too few to match the overwhelming tide of monsters. Thus, in response to this dire shortage, something new was created, a force born out of necessity to stand against the relentless threat. It was none other than artificial life, beings created by human hands, their glowing eyes and formidable presence signaling a new weapon in the fight for survival. This creation was known as the Chimera Hunter, a powerful artificial warrior, forged to annihilate monsters with unmatched precision and devastating force. The experiments utilized grim materials, corpses of death row inmates and animals, serving as the foundation for creating these artificial warriors. They also incorporated rare minerals harvested from deep within the gates, their otherworldly energy serving as a vital component in the creation process. Finally, monster cells were added to the mix, infusing the creations with the power and ferocity of the very beasts they were designed to hunt. In a desperate bid for survival, humanity pushed the limits of science and morality, fusing the remains of beasts and humans within ominous laboratories to forge weapons capable of turning the tide. These advancements made it possible to mass-produce chimera hunters, ensuring a steady army of artificial warriors to confront the monstrous threat. This alliance was hailed as the perfect fusion of the scientific and hunter communities, combining intellect and combat prowess to create humanity's ultimate line of defense. This collaboration significantly reduced hunter mortality rates and saved countless lives, marking a turning point in humanity's battle for survival. Decades later, under the quiet of night, an illegal chimera research lab operated in secrecy. Inside, a weary worker sighed, muttering to himself that he only had one last subject to check before he could finally head home. In the B-18 high-grade chimera storage, two researchers moved cautiously down the dimly lit corridor. One of them stopped, shining his flashlight on a particular cell. "Huh? This one, number 17. His arm looks a little rotten," he remarked with concern. One researcher shouted urgently, "Hey, hey, don't go near him." The other, unfazed, replied calmly, "It's fine. His brain is damaged. He won't move without orders." A monstrous creature was chained to the ground, its body twisted and unnatural. Its right arm was grotesquely deformed, oozing with strange growths. One of the researchers shined a light on it and said, "Look, his right arm is completely messed up." Could this be a side effect of the experiment? One of the researchers scoffed and said, "Why are you so scared of a guy who can't even see properly?" But as he spoke, the creature's golden, slit-pupiled eye suddenly snapped open. One of the researchers stammered, "Let's just roughly pass it. At this rate, he'll be discarded anyway." The other gave a casual nod and replied, All right, man. The chained creature sat silently in the dimly lit cell, its piercing eyes locked on the two researchers. Neither spoke, the heavy atmosphere pressing down on them as the sound of chains subtly echoed in the air. Inside the lab director's office, a cold and detached voice declared, "Number 17 is now useless," sealing the creature's fate without a hint of remorse. One of the scientists reported, "His body is too badly damaged. If it were any other one, it would have died already." The lab director, seated behind his desk, responded coldly. "How much longer does it have?" one of the scientists replied. "A month at most." The other nodded in agreement, adding, "I agree." The man smirked slightly and said, "Really? Then, deploy him in this gate blockade operation. Have him guard the rear when the hunters retreat." Under the dim, cold light, the chained beast lay battered and bloodied. Directors commanded researchers to do not input a return command. In the scorching skies of the Demon Realm's Rocky Mountain region, the ground cracked beneath a lone figure's presence, shockwaves radiating outward as golden streaks tore through the air around them. From the crimson skies above, a massive golden-scaled beast dove with its jaws stretched wide, rows of razor-sharp teeth glinting menacingly. Its roar tore through the air as it descended upon the lone, horned figure below, casting a monstrous shadow over its prey. The number 17's powerful clawed legs tensed as it pushed off the ground, golden energy swirling around its body. Blood from a fresh wound trailed down its back, yet its movements carried an unyielding ferocity. The beast comes flying, its blood-stained body twisting with raw power, but as golden energy beams crisscrossed around it. Number 17 swings his claw and teared that flying creature in the mid-sky. Suddenly, the ground around the number 17 shattered violently, spiderweb cracks spreading from its position as fiery projectiles rained down from above. Explosions erupted all around, filling the battlefield with smoke, debris, and the scent of scorched earth. Yet the number 17 at the center remained unshaken, its gaze locked forward. From the cracked, blood-stained ground, a massive creature erupted, its gaping maw lined with rows of razor-sharp teeth. Vines slick with venom lashed out from its mouth, flailing wildly as it let out a deafening roar. The force of its emergence sent shockwaves through the battlefield, but the lone, white-haired number 17 stood firm, facing the monstrous threat head-on. The ground quaked under the colossal number 17's weight as its massive, clawed limbs struck the earth, shattering stone and leaving deep cracks in their wake. Its glowing, predatory eyes locked onto its prey, radiating a terrifying intent as an ominous energy began to surge through the battlefield. With a sudden burst of energy, number 17 launched itself high into the sky, leaving a radiant trail of power in its wake. Below, the massive plant-like beast recoiled in surprise, its tendrils writhing as it realized it's too late. Number 17 twisted midair, and with his massive claws it sliced that plant-like beast, slicing arcs of red meat hurtling toward it. Explosions erupted around the battlefield, debris and shockwaves tearing through the ground. Number 17's jaws opened wide, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth as arcs of crackling blue lightning danced around them. At its center, a brilliant sphere of concentrated energy began to form, radiating an ominous glow as raw power gathered for a devastating attack. A blinding surge of blue lightning erupted from the number 17's maw, tearing through the air like a spear of pure destruction. The beam shot downward with unstoppable force, its crackling energy scorching everything in its path as it closed in on its target. The lightning beam struck its target head-on, engulfing the creature in a torrent of blinding blue energy. Sparks and arcs crackled violently around its body as it let out a pained, guttural cry, the force of the attack tearing through the air with devastating intensity. The searing lightning engulfed the foe completely, its body convulsing violently under the overwhelming power. Sparks danced across its frame as it let out a deafening scream of agony, the sound echoing through the battlefield while the blinding light threatened to tear it apart from the inside out. The battlefield lay in ruin, streaks of lightning still crackling in the air as the dust settled. The group stared at the lone figure ahead, their gazes filled with awe. "Amazing," one of them breathed, unable to hide their astonishment. "To annihilate so many monsters with a single attack," another remarked, his voice tinged with respect. "As expected of an S-class chimera hunter." The man glanced at the swirling, fiery portal in the distance, his expression tense. "By the way, there's no sign of the gate closing. It's the third day," he said gravely. But then, another guy, in a calmer tone, told him to, "Don't worry too much," saying, "No matter how many monsters pour out, As long as we have that S-class chimera, we can hold out indefinitely, he declared confidently. But as he spoke, a towering mass of monsters surged upward like a dark tidal wave, racing toward number 17, standing defiantly at the peak. That man gripped his weapon tightly, the steel gleaming under the ominous crimson sky. "We just have to," he muttered, bracing himself for what was to come. "We just have to," he said, before swinging his blade in a swift, deadly arc. Green blood splattered as the monster was cleaved apart. "Deal with the stragglers that get through." The gate pulsed ominously, its swirling darkness framed by a blazing crimson glow. An unsettling hum filled the air, as if the portal itself was alive and waiting to unleash what lay beyond. A voice rang out urgently. "Red gate disappearance signal confirmed." The tension in the air thickened as the man in the long coat tightened his grip on his weapon, his eyes locked forward. "It's here," he said, his tone calm yet edged with anticipation, as the last remnants of slain monsters littered the ground around them. "All right, retreat. Everyone, exit through the gate." The order rang out with urgency as boots pounded against the ground, their wearers sprinting toward safety before the portal closed. A clenched fist smashed forward with explosive force, the impact shattering the surface it struck as shockwaves rippled outward. Number 17 continued fighting. A massive red and blue creature attacked fiercely, its claws striking down at number 17 on the ground. Two hunters sprinted away from the scene. One of them, a red-haired woman, called out, "Wait, aren't we taking that number 17? The dark-haired man beside her replied without slowing down, "Leave him. They said not to retrieve him." The red-haired woman questioned in disbelief. "What? Isn't that expensive?" Meanwhile, number 17, with piercing yellow eyes, struggled under the crushing grip of the massive red and blue claw. "They said its lifespan was over anyway," the man's detached voice replied. As they sprinted toward the gate, the red-haired woman's voice wavered with guilt. "I feel kind of bad. If it weren't for him, the damage would have been immense this time." The dark-haired man shot her a sidelong glance and replied bluntly, "Why worry unnecessarily? You know those guys are practically inorganic." Number 17's single, blazing eye glowed with an intense golden light, its gaze unwavering. Black-haired man told the girl that they just follow orders and their master. The words echoed, cold and detached, as if stripping away any notion of individuality or will. A powerful grip tightened around number 17's limb, blood dripping from the point of contact. The force behind the hold radiated sheer determination, as if refusing to let the creature escape no matter the cost. With a brutal strike of number 17, the creature's limb was severed, spraying white fluid through the air. The bloodied figure, hair whipping wildly, stood amidst the chaos, their form battered yet unyielding. In the lingering silence of the clash, one truth echoed in number 17's mind. They're monsters. The mission was clear: secure the hunter's rear at all costs. On the battlefield, number 17 clashed violently with its enemy, severed limbs flying through the air and splattering the ground. Despite the chaos, it stood its ground, holding the line so the others could press forward without fear of an attack from behind. A monstrous maw, lined with jagged teeth and dripping with saliva, lunged forward with a guttural roar. Its glowing yellow eyes burned with hunger and rage, but before it could strike, a sudden surge of crackling blue energy descended, cutting through the darkness like a blade. A blinding surge of blue lightning erupted from number 17's grasp, its power crackling through the air with devastating force. Number 17's golden eye gleamed fiercely beneath its horned crown, locked onto its target with predatory focus as the energy sphere in its hand radiated overwhelming destruction. A colossal beam of blue and white energy erupted forward, splitting the ground apart as chunks of debris were blasted into the air. The sheer force of the attack illuminated the surroundings, its destructive power tearing through everything in its path with unstoppable momentum. The ground was still cracking from the devastating blast, debris scattering across the battlefield as arcs of blue lightning flickered in the air. Amid the chaos, a calm but firm voice echoed in number 17's mind, cutting through the tension with a single question. "Do you understand?" Bathed in swirling green miasma, number 17 staggered forward, its body torn and bleeding from fresh wounds. Blood dripped from its jagged teeth as its claws stretched outward, still ready to strike despite its battered state. Its labored breaths mixed with the toxic haze, creating a scene of relentless, desperate ferocity. The words appeared in number 17's mind, framed by a flat, steady heartbeat line. "There is nothing else." The ominous message pulsed in number 17's mind. When the mission is over, it means you don't need to return. The comms crackled with a cold, detached voice. Number 17 said, "Retreat route, secured, severed." Bloodied claw of number 17 dropped heavily onto the ground, its sharp black talons curling lifelessly. Number 17 had completed his mission. The cracked, barren ground was splattered with thick green fluid, its stench hanging heavy in the air. At the center of the mess lay battered, bloodied number 17 barely clinging to life, while the remains of a severed claw rested beside him, with massive, slime-covered number 17 loomed in the light, its jagged teeth bared as thick green fluid dripped from its body. In his mind, a voice instructed him that return is not permitted. On this day, the final mission report for Chimera Hunter number 17, who met its demise, was recorded as follows: number of hunter deaths, 0. The battlefield was littered with the corpses of countless monsters, their twisted forms sprawled in heaps across the cracked earth. In the foreground, the massive segmented body of a slain creature lay still, green blood pooling beneath it. It recalled that it had once been a complete human, and that it was kidnapped at the age of 9. Starting from that memory, a panorama of number 17's life began to flash before its eyes. Unfortunately, number 17's damaged brain couldn't fully comprehend the meaning behind those scenes. It calmly watched its past life unfold. 79 years ago, at the District 13 orphanage, a man stood outside holding a baby. Looking down at the child, he read softly, "The child's name is." 70 years ago, a boy sat silently on a chair, his head lowered. A man stood before him, scolding, "You hit a friend with a stone because they teased you a bit? How many times has this happened now?" The boy remained wordless. Snow fell quietly outside as the doors slammed shut with a loud bang. "We can't keep you anymore." With those words echoing in his mind, the boy stepped out into the falling snow, arms crossed against the cold, leaving the orphanage behind. The boy collapsed face first into the snow, his breath visible in the cold air. A looming shadow stretched over him, hinting at someone, or something, approaching. One of the men scoffed, remarking on how, in the slums, children could be found rolling around in the snow. Another voice followed, cold and transactional, asking, "How much is all this?" Strapped to a cold metal table, the boy lay motionless, his limbs bound by restraints and electrodes fixed to his skin. His mouth was gagged, preventing any cry for help. A gloved hand loomed over him, holding a syringe filled with a mysterious purple liquid. From somewhere in the room, a voice questioned with chilling detachment, "Is it a new experimental subject?" In a dimly lit laboratory, several scientists stood around the restrained boy, discussing his identity with clinical detachment. "What number?" one asked. "It's number 17, another replied without hesitation. A quiet observation followed, laced with grim certainty. Spells must have been cast to ensure there was no chance of escape. One of the masked scientists gave a curt order. "Okay, record it." Another, holding a clipboard, noted in a clinical tone, "Number 17, S+ class silkworm larva cell injection." Number 17's restrained hand twitched violently, the black tattoo stark against his pale skin. One of the observers spoke with clinical anticipation. "All right, let's watch now. What kind of reaction will appear?" One of the researchers stared at the readings in disbelief. "What? No side effects?" Another observed the restrained boy in the chair and added, "A special ability has appeared, but his human form and ego are maintained." One of the researchers examined the data carefully and remarked, "It seems to have a unique constitution." Another, with a cold and clinical tone, ordered, "Keep implanting various things until there's a reaction." The group of scientists huddled closely together under the harsh white light, their lab coats forming a wall of secrecy. Whatever they were observing seemed to demand their full attention, the air in the dimly lit lab thick with tension. Then, 64 years ago, the scene shifts to a dimly lit space where a figure, partially visible and wearing tattered clothing, moves hurriedly, their posture tense as if fleeing from something. In the midst of a crumbling room, number 17 stood firm, energy radiating in a brilliant blue sphere between his hands. The ground beneath him cracked from the force, while behind him, two figures struggled, one coughing on the floor and another cowering in fear. In front of him, a beast with golden fur and a spiked crest loomed, the tension between them crackling in the air. A massive, horned, insect-like creature with a yellow and black armored body charged forward at full speed. Its jagged jaws were wide open in a feral roar, sharp fangs bared, and its bladed wings cut through the air as it hurtled toward its target with deadly intent. The blurred cityscape behind it made its speed and ferocity even more terrifying. The monstrous hornet lunged forward with blinding speed, but suddenly a brilliant sphere of blue energy comes towards it. The intense light illuminated its snarling jaws and menacing stinger, moments before the inevitable impact. 7. Result of implanting over 500 types of monster cells for 15 years. His meticulous handwriting filled the clipboard, illuminated under the cold glow of the laboratory lights. 54 years ago, deep within a secret laboratory, relentless experiments took place. For 15 years, over 500 types of monster cells were implanted into a single subject, number 17. The result was extraordinary, a being with power beyond measure, possessing at least an S-rank hunter classification, his true strength practically incalculable. Now, bound in heavy chains and drenched in blood, number 17 sat restrained in a chair, his monstrous aura radiating in the dim light. The scientist, unable to hide his manic pride, declared him the lab's greatest success. But in the present, that same scientist watched number 17 falter mid-step. With a sly grin, he taunted, "Oh, number 17, why did you stop? Did your memory get confused?" Moments later, his voice rose in exhilaration. "Yes, your side effects have finally begun." Number 17 froze, his eyes narrowing as he muttered to himself in confusion. Side effects? 20 years ago, a gloved hand held out a piece of raw meat, the gesture deliberate and coaxing. "All right, number 17, good boy," the voice called out softly, as if speaking to something dangerous that needed careful handling. The young woman flinched back in shock as a large, bird-like creature with sharp features and blazing orange eyes lunged toward her. "Whoa!" she exclaimed, instinctively stepping away from the sudden, aggressive movement. The woman crouched a short distance away, smiling in satisfaction. "See? I told you it would eat," she said, watching the creature tear into its meal. This monster was number 17. Nearby, a mother turned away in disgust. "It's gross," a man gently covered his young son's eyes. "Don't look at things like that," he said firmly, steering the child away from the unsettling scene. 3 days ago, a blinding surge of energy erupted in the air, splitting the sky with crackling light. Number 17's golden eyes widened, reflecting the storm of power as arcs of electricity danced violently around it. Massive, grotesque number 17 let out a final, haunting roar as its body began to dissolve into fragments of light. Its fading voice echoed through the air, repeating in a broken mechanical tone, "All missions, complete." As the sun dipped low on the horizon, its golden rays illuminated a vast, jagged chasm that tore through the barren land. The ground was littered with bones and remnants of the fallen, a silent testament to the devastation that had unfolded here. A haunting wind whispered through the canyon, carrying with it the echoes of battles long past. Amid the desolate expanse, a single weathered bone lay half buried in the dust. The bone shifted suddenly, scraping against the dry earth as if stirred by an unseen force. In an instant, with a blinding pillar of light, that bone erupted from the ground, tearing through the darkness and piercing the sky. The sheer force of its emergence sent shockwaves rippling across the barren land, as if heralding the return of something powerful and long forgotten. A massive spinal column, brimming with crackling energy, shot up from the earth, each segment pulsing with unnatural vitality. The narration echoed ominously. This was no ordinary relic. It carried within it the combined power of 527 different types of monster cells, a grotesque fusion of countless creatures' strengths. Its skeletal frame continued to assemble, ribs locking into place around a dark, pulsating core. The voice of the narration rang clear. This abomination was no mere monster, but Chimera Hunter number 17, a weapon forged from the cells of hundreds of deadly beasts, reborn for one purpose alone: the hunt. From its spine and ribs, sinewy cords of muscle began weaving into place, twisting and binding together with unnatural speed. The once lifeless bones pulsed with grotesque vitality, each fiber brimming with monstrous power as the creature's body took shape. A blinding explosion erupted, flooding the darkness with searing light. Flames burst outward in every direction, tearing through the air with a deafening roar, as if the world itself was splitting apart. Then bare feet touched down softly on the cracked ground, the air around them still hazy with lingering smoke from the explosion. He looked down at his hands in disbelief, his voice trembling. "What is this?" he muttered, the unfamiliar warmth of flesh replacing what he had once been. A haze of confusion filled his mind as he took in his transformed body. "Am I human again now?" he asked himself, the words barely more than a whisper. Bathed in the warm glow of the rising sun, he stood at the center of the barren land, his shadow stretching long across the cracked earth. The massive stone arch framed the light behind him, as if the world itself was announcing his return. Revival. The man stood there, looking down at himself in disbelief. His voice trembled as he wondered if he had truly returned to being human again. He looked at his hand, noticing the monstrous claws that had formed. Although he appeared human, he realized that the monster cells within him still remained, meaning he couldn't truly call himself human. Reflecting on the situation, he thought that a lot of time must have passed, and since the lab hadn't come to retrieve him, something unusual was going on. He realized he had been discarded. The experimental number once engraved on his wrist had vanished as well. Looking at his hand, he wondered if this meant he was finally free, no longer bound to the lab or its control. Thinking about the nature of this power, he concluded that such a transformation could only belong to an immortal type ability. He understood the nature of the ability. It allowed the body to revive up to 3 times, as long as its core remained intact and wasn't destroyed. He recalled how it was believed that human and immortal cells could never fuse. Yet, looking at himself now, he realized that his body had fully recovered, restored to its peak condition. He realized that with all the side effects of the experiment gone, his condition had reached its best state. The constant haze that clouded his mind since the beginning had finally lifted. Even the spells engraved on him to prevent escape or rebellion had completely disappeared. He thought to himself that if his existence as experiment number 17 had truly ended, then perhaps it was finally time for him to live a normal life, as a human. He reflected that number 17 was nothing more than a label forced on him by the lab. His true identity had been buried beneath that number. He remembered someone once telling him that while he might seem rough or even unstable, he should strive to live with purpose by consciously helping others. He recalled the words spoken to him. If he could live a life helping countless others, that would give him true purpose. And in that moment, his original name came back to him, Cheon Do-woon. He scoffed at the idea, calling it nonsense. To him, the thought of helping others felt meaningless. After all, how could an orphan who grew up in the slums possibly be capable of saving anyone else? It didn't make sense. He stood at the edge of the cliff, staring into the vast horizon as the sun set. With his thoughts heavy, he questioned what path he should take now. The idea of revenge echoed in his mind, tempting him as a possible answer. He realized that revenge wasn't something he could pursue blindly. It required a clear target standing before him, someone to focus that rage upon. He admitted to himself that the events which had once fueled his hatred now felt so distant that his desire for revenge no longer burned as fiercely. Besides, there was no way for him to return to the human world at this moment. He decided that if he lived long enough, he would eventually cross paths with them again. For now, he pushed the thought aside, telling himself he would deal with it when the time came. He narrowed his eyes, his gaze firm and focused as he looked down on his lower body. He stood tall, his back to the setting sun as its light shone through him, casting a powerful silhouette. In silence, he faced the horizon, lost in thought about the uncertain path ahead. At last, he made his choice. For the time being, he decided to set everything else aside and try living, at least a little, like a human. As he took his first steps forward, a simple but important thought crossed his mind. If he was going to live like a human, the first thing he needed was clothes. As he walked across the barren land, he wondered to himself, when was the last time he had even worn clothes? The thought felt distant, almost foreign, after everything he had been through. As he wandered near the shimmering lake, he wondered what material he could possibly use to make clothes. The thought lingered in his mind. Whatever it was, it would need to be tough enough to last. Peeking through the bushes, he considered his next step. Perhaps it was best to look around the area for something useful, anything that could serve as material for clothes. As he searched, something caught his attention. With a curious look, he leaned closer and muttered, This is... He came across the fallen body of a large beast. Observing its state, he wondered if it had died in a territorial dispute. Judging by the lack of major injuries, he concluded that it must have been an exceptionally strong creature. Looking closer at the creature, he realized the truth. It hadn't fallen in battle. Instead, it must have died from poison. He smirked with satisfaction and raised his hand. "Good," he muttered, relieved. It was perfect timing, just when he needed leather. Without hesitation he drew his blade. As a sparks of energy flashed, his hand turned into a blade. This was another creature's power he got. Holding the curved blade firmly, he muttered with a faint smile, "I guess I'll need a blade to make it easier, right?" He recalled the lessons he had learned back at the lab. "First, cut the belly straight, then make incisions along the limbs, right?" he muttered to himself, visualizing the steps in his mind. With a determined look, he nodded to himself and said, "Okay, let's try it." As he pressed the blade down, blood unexpectedly seeped out, making his eyes widen in shock. And the next second, his body was suddenly enveloped in a surge of dark gas that comes out of that bird's body. Eyes narrowing, he muttered in disbelief, "This is—" The air around him twisted violently as a sinister miasma spread out. His eyes widened in realization. Poisonous aura. The ground darkened, trees withered, and even the fallen beast nearby convulsed under the suffocating energy. Despite the poisonous aura swirling violently around him, his body remained completely unharmed. No damage. Glancing at the faint stench in the air, he muttered calmly, "It smells. I'll have to wash it." After finishing his task, he looked at his handiwork with satisfaction. "It's done. Not bad for a first try, is it?" he remarked proudly. Then, without hesitation, he turned his gaze forward and muttered, "Next." He stepped into the clear stream, the cool water rippling around his hand as bubbles rose to the surface with each movement. After cleaning it, he examined the hide in his hand, puzzled. "It looked soft when I saw it," he muttered, tugging at the material, but as he tested its texture, he frowned. "Is it because it's monster hide? It's too stiff. It's not like it's a metal plate or something." His eyes widened as an idea suddenly struck him, a spark of realization lighting up his expression. "Oh, in times like this," he exclaimed, clearly having thought of a solution. Without hesitation, he slammed his fist down on the monster hide repeatedly, using brute force to soften and shape it. The ground shook with each powerful strike. Panting slightly, he glanced at his work and muttered, "Is this how you tanned?" He wasn't entirely sure of the process, but reasoning aloud, he added, "Well, it must be, right?" He lifted the processed hide in his hands, giving it a gentle shake. A bright smile spread across his face as he thought, "Oh, it's done." It's soft. The once stiff monster hide had transformed into a smooth, pliable material, just as he had hoped. He nodded in satisfaction, holding the tanned hide. "Good, good," he murmured. "The size should be roughly this, right?" Everything seemed to be coming together just as he had envisioned. Just then, the bird beast which he just skinned, a small fire awaked on it, showing that it's alive. After cutting the hide roughly to size, he held it up with determination. But then, the fiery creature unexpectedly emerged from the ground, glaring at him with a fierce intensity. He didn't notice that, and with a burst of strength, he clenched his fist tightly around the pelt, the force radiating outward as the fabric tore under the pressure, showing his sheer determination. He slipped the hide into place, adjusting it around his body with a firm pull. Looking at the result, he smirked slightly and muttered, "Oh, not bad?" clearly satisfied with his handiwork. Standing tall under the clear blue sky, he admired his handiwork. The rough, makeshift garment clung snugly to his frame as he tightened the belt around his waist. With a satisfied smile, he declared, "It fits my body perfectly." As he adjusted his rough new clothing, he noticed a strange sensation in his shoulder. Pulling the fabric aside, his eyes narrowed at the sight of a dark purple mark spreading faintly across his skin. Examining it closely, his expression turned serious as he realized the poison hasn't fully drained. He let out a thoughtful hum, knowing this was something he couldn't ignore. As he sighed in annoyance, deciding to just wear his makeshift clothes despite the discomfort, a strange sound caught his attention. Phew! Phew! Startled, he turned toward the source and froze. By the water's edge, the creature he thought was long dead suddenly stirred, flames flickering weakly from its head. With a puzzled look, he muttered, "What, wasn't it dead?" The creature suddenly gasped and choked, its twin flaming heads twitching as if in distress. Despite its weak state, it seemed to react to his presence, almost as though it could understand him. Watching closely, he thought to himself, "Is it just my imagination, or does it actually understand what I'm saying?" Observing the strange creature struggling yet still alive, he stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Seeing that it's alive despite having rigor mortis," he muttered, narrowing his eyes, "this one must be an immortal type too." He looked at the struggling creature, its flames flickering weakly. If it were before, I would have killed it without hesitation, because I was a hunter. But now, as he studied it more closely, he realized, the opponent is already weakened and not even a threat. There's no need to kill it. He looked at the weakened creature and smiled softly. You and I are both lucky. Since it's our second life, let's live well. As he turned and walked away, he glanced back one last time. If fate allows, we'll meet again somewhere, he said calmly. The weakened creature lay in silence, its fiery gaze following him as he disappeared into the distance. Bare footsteps echoed softly against the rocky ground as he slowly emerged from the shadows, each step carrying an eerie weight in the silence. Now that he had managed to take care of his clothes, he walked forward with determination. What he needed next was clear. I need a house, he thought, already planning his next step for survival. Suddenly, the ground beneath him began to crack, faint sparks flickering out as the stone split apart. Something was about to emerge from below. With a deafening screech, a colossal centipede-like monster burst forth, its sharp mandibles snapping and its many legs clawing at the ground. The man stood calmly, hands folded behind his back, staring up at the towering creature without a hint of fear. The monstrous centipede loomed high above, its razor-sharp claws glinting menacingly as it prepared to strike. From below, the man stood firm, gazing up at the towering beast with unwavering calm, his posture unshaken despite the terrifying sight. The young man looked up at the towering creature with calm eyes, tilting his head slightly as he asked, almost casually, "Is it too dark here?" With a single sweeping motion of his arm, the young man unleashed a devastating strike. A sharp arc of force ripped through the air, slicing cleanly across the monstrous centipede's body. Green blood sprayed wildly as the beast screeched in agony, its massive form reeling back under the overwhelming power of his attack. As the beast's body collapsed, its green blood splattering across the cave floor, the young man calmly turned his back. With his hands folded neatly behind him, he walked toward the light at the end of the tunnel. His voice was cold and indifferent as he dismissed the fallen creature with just one word: rejected. The echo of his words lingered in the cavern, overshadowing even the dying screeches of the monstrous centipede. Then he went to a snowy mountain. A cold wind swept across the mountains, carrying with it a relentless flurry of snow. Their large white-furred beast with a blue face lay in the snow, its mouth wide open in a cry filled with sharp fangs. Snowflakes fell around it as it struggled. Armeek walked past the fallen snow beasts lying across the ground. Looking at the desolate, frozen land around him, he thought to himself that it would be difficult to find any food in such a place. So this place was also rejected. He then walked through the dense forest and suddenly he wrinkled his nose in disgust. The foul odor in the air made him frown, and he muttered to himself about how unbearable the smell was. Nearby, strange glowing mushrooms clung to the side of a tree, releasing the stench. This was also rejected. He then stepped into a dark cave, noticing the damp walls and the sticky green liquid dripping down from above. The air felt heavy and wet, making him frown in discomfort as he muttered to himself that the place was far too humid. This was also rejected. He left the damp cave behind, only to step into another place where streams of lava glowed brightly. The intense heat pressed against him, and with a weary sigh, he muttered that it was unbearably hot. He also rejected it. Stepping out into the open, he was met with a clear blue sky and warm sunlight pouring down. Standing tall on the edge of a rocky cliff, he looked around in surprise and quietly muttered, "Oh," as the brightness washed over him. Standing atop the cliff, he gazed at the breathtaking sight before him, lush greenery, cascading waterfalls, and a rainbow shimmering in the sunlight. With a hint of surprise, he admitted to himself that the scenery was quite impressive. He never thought he would one day find the demon realm beautiful. Looking out at the peaceful scenery, he wondered aloud if he should explore further. Without hesitation, he leapt gracefully from the cliffside, ready to look around a bit more. He landed with force, the ground cracking beneath him as dust and debris scattered. The impact shook the earth, showing the sheer strength behind his leap. He stood by the water's edge, gazing down at the clear surface. Beneath the gentle ripples, schools of fish swam freely. Observing the scene, he noted that the water was clean and full of life, with plenty of fish to be found. From beneath the surface, sharp-toothed fish lunged upward with menacing glares, their jaws wide open. Watching them, he thought they looked quite delicious. He imagined that if he caught one and roasted it on the spot, it would feel just like camping. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully, imagining a simple life by the water. With the abundance of fish acting as a natural food source, he pictured himself building a small house, sitting outside by a campfire, and living peacefully in the area. As he walked further, his eyes caught sight of bright yellow flowers blooming under the clear sky. The gentle sway of the petals in the breeze added to the peaceful beauty of the place, making him pause to take it in. As he continued walking, he noticed the fresh scent carried by the breeze. The sunlight streamed gently through the trees, and he breathed in deeply, realizing how clean and refreshing the air was. Standing among the tall trees with sunlight filtering gently through the leaves, he took a deep breath of the fresh air. Surrounded by flowers and greenery, he felt a sense of peace and simply thought to himself, "Good." With a calm smile, he looked up at the sunlight streaming through the leaves above. Feeling at peace, he softly envisioned the name for his future home, Cheon-do-woon House. As leaves gently rustled down from the trees, a single word seemed to echo through the air: approved. At the same time in that dungeon, beneath the wide blue sky, leaves drifted gently across the open plains. The land stretched far into the distance, with mountains rising faintly on the horizon, as if marking the beginning of a new journey. Suddenly, cracks began to spread across the space, glowing with a sharp blue light. The space trembled slightly as energy surged from beneath the surface, signaling that something powerful was about to emerge. The cracks in the space split wide open, releasing a blinding blue light. In an instant, a swirling vortex appeared, twisting violently as if tearing through space itself, ready to connect this land to another realm. With a thunderous crash, something comes out of the vortex and slammed into the ground, scattering dirt and debris in every direction. The impact left the air trembling, as if announcing the arrival of something extraordinary. From within the smoke and dust, a dark figure emerged. Sparks of red energy crackled around its body, and its heavy steps pressed into the ground. The atmosphere grew tense as the mysterious being revealed itself from the vortex's aftermath. Through the smoke and glowing embers, a robot-like figure appeared, its eyes burning a deep, menacing red. Sparks of energy flickered across its body as it looked around, its mechanical voice echoing with a question. "This is the demon realm." On the other hand, our MC clenched his fist, determination shining in his eyes. He told himself that the first step would be finding a proper site to build his house, setting the foundation for the life he envisioned. With a powerful motion, golden energy burst forth from his hand, arcing through the air. It shot downward like a blazing streak of light, slamming into the forest below with explosive force, marking the spot where he intended to build his home. The golden energy struck the forest floor with blinding force, instantly slicing through the massive trees. One after another, their trunks were cleanly severed, toppling down as the land cleared itself, making way for the foundation of his future home. MC surveyed the fallen trees and the cleared land with a nod of satisfaction. "This much for the site should be enough," he murmured, acknowledging that the space was now ready to begin the next stage of construction. With a wave of his hand, the logs floated up, bound by glowing strands of energy. He carefully separated the sturdy, well-preserved trees from the rest. "Let's gather the good-conditioned trees separately," he said, preparing them for the next stage of construction. MC stood with his arms crossed, gazing at the neatly stacked logs. "This many trees should be enough," he muttered thoughtfully. Then his eyes shifted to the stumps scattered across the clearing, a slight frown crossing his face. "Is the floor too uneven?" he wondered, already considering the next step in preparing the site. MC gripped tightly and pulled with all his strength, shouting, "Heave-ho!" In an instant, the ground erupted with a thunderous crack as roots and earth were torn apart. Splinters, soil, and leaves burst into the air, the sheer force of his action flattening the uneven land beneath him. He looked over the vast cleared land, satisfied with the result of his effort. The once uneven ground was now leveled, open to the sky. "Oh, this is good," he muttered, a faint smile forming. "It'll get good sunlight." He pressed his hand firmly against the wooden surface, his thoughts calm and focused. "I just moved my hands and feet as my heart guided me," he reflected, allowing instinct to lead the way rather than overthinking. Balancing the massive log on one shoulder, he examined the ground carefully. "First, I'll plant pillars at each corner," he muttered. The heavy logs sank into the ground with a solid thud as he planted them firmly in place. "What do they call this? Free will?" he wondered, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Despite the sweat on his brow, there was a lightness in his heart. "Anyway, it's fun." "Is it because it's my first time building my own house?" he thought, feeling an unfamiliar sense of satisfaction. He moved quickly, almost like a blur, placing one plank after another with steady precision. "Let's lay planks on the floor," he muttered to himself, straightening the base of the structure. Step by step, the house was beginning to take shape. He examined the sticky green substance oozing in his hand, its slimy texture bubbling faintly. "Building walls," he muttered. Since there were no nails to use, he had to improvise. With a firm nod, he decided, "I'll use snail-type monster mucus instead." He carefully pressed the logs together, using the thick green mucus as adhesive. "Once it hardens," he thought, "it'll be as solid as rock." A faint smile crossed his face as he added, "Waterproofing in a way, as the bright sky, golden rays spilling down as the leaves rustled gently in the breeze. Now, for the finishing touches," he murmured, ready to complete his work. He looked up with a satisfied smile, hands resting on his hips as the sunlight shone down on him. "Good," he said confidently. "Most monsters won't even dare to approach." MC stood proudly in front of the small wooden hut, its walls reinforced with snail-type monster mucus and decorated with silkworm larva's cocoon silk. Despite its unusual construction, he smiled with satisfaction. "Quite cozy. I like it," he said, clearly pleased with his work. He stood in thought as he examined his work. "But it's a bit lacking," he muttered to himself, a slight frown forming. It felt like something was missing, though he couldn't immediately put his finger on what it was. He pondered to himself, what was a normal human house like? His mind drifted back to a memory of a classroom. A teacher stood at the front, pointing to a projection on the screen. "See, this is what a regular house looked like before the gate opened," the teacher explained, as the students watched an image of an ordinary home with people and a dog in the yard. He recalled the images from the educational videos he had seen back at the lab. In those recordings, families often gathered happily in their yards, children laughing, parents smiling, and even pets playing around. "In the educational videos I saw at the lab, they usually grew something in the yard," he thought, piecing together the memory. He glanced into the distance, watching the empty yard. "That said, I can't raise human world dogs in the demon realm," he admitted to himself, realizing the harsh reality of his situation. Kneeling down and pressing his hand against the ground, he muttered to himself, "Plants? Should I make a vegetable garden? But what can I even plant in the demon realm?" His brow furrowed in uncertainty as he imagined the possibilities. His eyes widened in realization, and with a sudden spark of inspiration, something had just come to his mind. He suddenly remembered something important. There was a snowy mountain nearby, he thought, eyes lighting up at the idea. Then, with a spark of excitement, he wondered aloud, "Should I plant mandragora?" As snow whirled fiercely around the towering peak, the mountain shrouded in a relentless blizzard. The icy winds howled as if warning anyone who dared to approach. Mandragora's habitat lies in the deepest, mana-dense peaks of snowy mountains. But our MC trudged barefoot through the icy terrain, snowflakes swirling all around him, he muttered to himself with a shiver. "Speaking of which, it's really snowing a lot," as expected of a snowy mountain. Snow fell heavily around him as he looked up at the gray sky. A distant memory surfaced. "It was snowing this heavily the day I was kidnapped to the lab too," he thought, the bitter recollection weighing on him like the icy flakes settling on his hair and shoulders. The memory replayed vividly in his mind. At that moment, back then, it was so cold he actually thought being kidnapped was a relief. Looking back, there are some good points about becoming a chimera, he thought. Unlike before, when the cold could strip away his life, now he felt none of its bite. Hunger and freezing, once constant threats, were no longer concerns. It was a grim sort of comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. The snowfall began to ease, the once blinding flurry now reduced to drifting flakes that swayed gently in the wind. "Anyway, judging by the mana I'm feeling, I must be almost there," he thought. The air felt different, heavier, charged with energy. "The snow is also letting up," he murmured inwardly, realizing he was close to his destination. He stopped in his tracks, his gaze falling on the small cluster of vibrant green plants pushing through the snow, their leaves glistening despite the cold. "Found it," he muttered with relief. Luckily, it wasn't a wasted trip. MC knows that plants in front of him has fragile nature. Mandragora are sunfish-like monsters, highly vulnerable to stress. They can die from even the smallest environmental changes. MC crouched in the snow, carefully examining the plants. "If I'm going to relocate them, I guess younger, more adaptable individuals would be better, right?" he muttered to himself. With a measured decision, he concluded, just 3 roots would be enough. As he yanked the mandragora from the ground, the realization struck him immediately. They're going to scream. I should have covered my ears. As he pulled the plant from the ground, instead of a scream, the little mandragora let out a soft sound. Hoong! The small creature wiggled in his hand, its leafy head swaying and its round body covered in bits of soil. He blinked in surprise and thought, huh? What is this? He carefully pulled out another mandragora. The tiny creature blinked and let out a soft sound. Hoong! He looked at it in surprise and thought, one more. He stared at the tiny creature in his hand and thought in disbelief, this one too. The little mandragora wriggled loudly, hoong, hoong, surprising him even more. He looked at the little creatures in disbelief and thought, no way, are they? The tiny mandragoras wriggled in his hands, making soft noises. Watching them closely, he wondered, are they sleep-talking? It was well known that mandragora scream is actually a phenomenon that happens only when humans artificially cultivate them. It was revealed that in the low-mana human world, when mandragoras are placed under extreme stress, if they are forcibly pulled out, they let out a terrifying scream and die as a result. MC observed that since this was the demon realm, the mandragoras didn't scream when pulled out. However, what puzzled him was their lack of resistance. At this point, they should have been struggling desperately to escape, yet they remained still. He suddenly realized the reason behind the mandragora's unusual behavior. Instead of resisting, they seemed to recognize him as kin, because mandragora cells had also been implanted in his body. He calmly tucked the small mandragoras away, relieved by how easily they accepted him. With a faint smile, he thought that this worked out well. After all, it was better for them if they felt less stressed. MC began to imagine the possibilities for the future. Once the mandragoras had grown well, he thought, perhaps he could ask them for a few root tendrils to brew tea, or even enjoy their fruits as snacks. The thought made him smile as he pictured it vividly. He suddenly recalled an important fact. If the mandragora fruit was forcibly picked, it would become extremely poisonous. Realizing this, he concluded that he would have to persuade them kindly instead of trying to take it by force. MC stood on the snowy cliffside, his eyes narrowing as he listened carefully. From the distance, faint cries echoed through the mountains. It seems there are hunters nearby, he muttered. Though uncertain of their purpose, he couldn't understand why anyone would risk venturing into such a dangerous snowy mountain. He smirked with a confident glint in his eyes. Turning slightly, he asked aloud, almost playfully, shall I go grab some gatestone quickly? On the other hand, 2 men were fighting something. One of the men clenched his teeth in fury, shouting, damn it! To use us as bait and run off, his companion, gripping his weapon tightly, snapped back with urgency, snap out of it. They're coming again. The tension in their voices revealed just how dire their situation had become. From the darkness of the snowy forest, monstrous creatures lunged down upon the hunters with terrifying speed. The 2 men on the ground braced themselves, weapons raised, but the overwhelming number of beasts was too much. One of them cried out, struggling to withstand the sudden assault as claws and fangs closed in around them. A monstrous snow beast lunged forward, its gaping jaws splitting unnaturally wide. Inside its maw, rows of razor-sharp fangs glistened, but what was even more horrifying were the writhing, fleshy tentacles that extended from its throat. The hunters were now face to face with a nightmare far beyond their imagination. One man thrust his hand forward, summoning a glowing blue barrier that blocked the charging beasts. The creatures slammed into the shield with force, but he gritted his teeth and held on, straining under the impact. Sweat ran down that man's face as he gritted his teeth, his expression filled with strain and fear. His strength was failing, and with a trembling voice he muttered, no good. Realizing the situation was slipping out of his control, he struggled to hold the glowing shield as the monstrous beasts relentlessly attacked it. Cracks began to spread across the barrier, glowing faintly under the pressure. His hands trembled with effort as he realized in fear, the barrier will break soon. The cracks in the glowing barrier spread rapidly as the man's strength faltered. Beads of sweat rolled down his face while regret filled his thoughts. He cursed himself silently. I should have just stuck to odd jobs. Why did I even volunteer to find the chimera? The barrier finally shattered into glowing shards, scattering into the air. The man screamed in pure desperation, his voice cracking, help! As monstrous beasts lunged toward him, just then a light shined in the sky. It crashed down from the sky, followed by a deafening explosion. The ground erupted, blasting dirt and stone into the air as shockwaves tore through the battlefield. The battlefield was drowned in thick smoke and dust, the aftermath of the colossal impact still shaking the ground. The monsters, feral rabbit-like beasts with bloodthirsty eyes, snarled and growled, surrounding the two men trapped in the chaos. One soldier, barely able to stay on his feet, trembled as he raised his gun, while the other sat on the snow, wide-eyed and frozen in terror. His voice cracked as he stammered, "What is that?" From within the swirling smoke, an ominous silhouette slowly began to emerge. Through the thick smoke, the soldiers squinted their eyes in shock. One of them stammered in disbelief, realizing the dark silhouette was not a beast, but a human figure slowly emerging from the haze. Out of the dust and smoke, and our MC finally appeared. His face was calm and unreadable, his silence carrying more weight than words as he stood there, gazing forward with steady eyes. He narrowed his eyes at the creature before him. It looked like a snow rabbit, but its fierce glare and sharp fangs revealed it was anything but ordinary. The beast growled lowly, ready to strike, but the snow rabbits froze in place as an ominous presence loomed above the MC. He released his killing instinct, and a massive, shadowy figure with glowing eyes appeared, its terrifying aura filling the air. From the darkness, a chilling voice echoed, "Long time no see." The snow rabbits screamed in terror, their cries echoing through the frozen forest. Panic spread among them as they leapt and scattered in every direction, desperately trying to escape. MC stood calmly, watching as the frenzied creatures fled before him. The two hunters stared in shock, disbelief written across their faces. One clutched his wounded arm, his voice trembling said, "It's impossible, a B-class monster, running away as soon as it sees him." In the quiet moment that followed, one hunter expressed gratitude, saying how thankful they were for being saved. One of the hunter introduced himself as Kim Tae-hoon and pointed to his companion, Oh Seong-ju. With a respectful tone, he asked MC for his name. MC calmly replied that he is Cheon Do-woon. Kim Tae-hoon's mind raced as he studied the MC before him. Cheon Do-woon? I've never heard that name before, he thought. The MC's ragged outfit only deepened his suspicion. What's with those clothes? Could he be a reclusive hunter? MC couldn't help but question, why are they here? From their appearance, they clearly seemed like a D-class hunter. There was no way they didn't know how dangerous the snowy mountain was. One hunter hesitated before replying that this is because of money. They told MC that a request had been issued to capture a chimera alive. The reward offered was said to be substantial. Hearing this, MC's eyes sharpened as he muttered softly to himself. A chimera, one of the hunter explained with a laugh that a test subject had escaped from the lab. It was said to be some kind of machine creature, and while fleeing, it supposedly jumped into a gate. Hearing this, MC thought to himself with relief, if it's a machine creature, then they're not looking for me. MC made up his mind, thinking to himself, then it's fine. I should grab the gate stone and go. MC then questioned suspiciously, but where are your bags? You didn't come to the demon realm empty-handed, did you? The gate stone, one of the hunter quickly made up an excuse, stammering, those team members, those guys took everything and ran off. Clutching his wounded shoulder, the man gritted his teeth and shouted, they intended that from the start. Inwardly, he regretted not realizing it sooner, thinking, I should have noticed when that B-class hunter offered to let me join. Those traitorous hunters laughed and fled, leaving monsters in their wake. Hearing that MC thought to himself, then the gate stone is with them. Let's see. The nervous hunters, their bodies trembling from exhaustion, pleaded with MC, don't you have any plans to return? We're almost at our limit, you see. One stammered desperately. The other added, you know well what happens when you're contaminated by mana, don't you? They looked at him with a mix of fear and urgency, hoping for mercy. Well, the time a hunter could endure in Demon Realm varied greatly depending on their awakening grade. If they failed to return to the human world in time to purify the mana within them, most would inevitably die. But there was one anomaly. Our MC was the exception. Both of the hunters' desperate voices echoed. One asks that, can't he please take them to the human world, adding that his pregnant wife is at home, but MC wasn't listening to them, and was using his powers to search the other hunters. Found them, he muttered, locking onto his targets with unwavering focus. The desperate plea of the hunters was suddenly cut short. With a thunderous burst, MC shot forward with terrifying speed, the force leaving a deep crater behind. The two hunters froze, wide-eyed, their voices trembling. As Cheon Do-woon suddenly leapt into the sky with incredible speed, the hunters panicked and shouted after him. "Mr. Cheon Do-woon?" one of them cried out in shock.